Hi, I'm Jill Angelo, and welcome to the Gennev podcast. What do you do when you don't relate to any media communication anymore? When you just don't see anyone in magazines, ads, or the brands you buy that relate to you and how you live your life? You start your own, one that speaks to you. A 50-plus-year-old guy who's not done yet. That's what my guest, David Stewart, former professional photographer for publications like the New York Magazine and the New York Times and even GQ, did. David founded AGEIST, a digital lifestyle magazine for people 50 plus who are reinventing themselves and living in what he calls dissonance with how people 50 plus are told they should live by modern day media. Along with his Super Age podcast, David has created a very engaging community of people who are thriving in the second half of life. 40% of the American population is now over 50 years old. And if you're listening to the Gennev podcast, you may identify with that demographic. I know I do at age 47. You'll hear in this interview about the barriers and challenges David experienced as a 50-plus-year-old man and how he's working to reset the perception of women and men in this thriving demographic. One last thing before we begin. I came to know of David and his work through a friend who shared it with me. So please share this podcast with a friend. We create the change that we want, one informed person at a time. Welcome, David. It's great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, Jill.
First and foremost, I'm a fan of your work with AGEIST, of your TEDx talk on the modern, aging person of 50 plus. And so that's really what's drawn us to have you on the podcast today, because Gennev is really focused on women in the second half of life. And so thank you for joining us. I really want to first start with kind of your motivation behind the work that you do with AGEIST. And so do you want to just start with the purpose of the magazine and really what led you to start it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there was no grand design. There was no great, I just didn't decide to invent this thing. It just sort of developed. It was a curiosity that I noticed. I was like my mid 50s. And I noticed that anytime people like you or me were shown in the media, there was some like really terribly tragic medical thing wrong with us. And we needed our bag of meds or it was game over. And I thought, I don't know, I'm not like that. I don't know anybody like that. And, combined with the whole, at the time was just a real fixation on millennials, on younger people, and understanding what that was about, what was driving that. And we started AGEIST initially as a lot of sort of just financial research and advertising industry research to understand why this disconnect was here, why there was this, cultural dysmorphia that everyone was feeling. Like I felt about myself one way and I saw myself reflected in the world in this very different way, not very good way. And then we did a lot of interviews with people, like, thousands of hours of those, and got a better sense of how people like us were living and what was different between us and the way our parents lived or the way other people were living. And then we started publishing an extremely primitive newsletter to 50 of our friends. And our grand ambition was that they would still be our friends after we sent it to them.
That's a good ambition.
Keep the bar low. You're going to clear it.
Yeah.
And then it just sort of grew and grew and grew. And, now it's the Wall Street Journal wants to know about people like us. They call me because I know. And we sit at this interesting intersection of, we have community, we have publishing, and then we do a lot of research for our clients. So I know what my clients are up to. I know what they're working on, and then we do these big quant and qual research projects for them. So we know, like on a quantitative level, what's going on with people, and then we have all the feedback from social and our community. So we really we know about this stuff.
What, without giving it all away, because I
Sure.
realize this is your business.
No, it's fine.
What are some of the things that especially in the early days, did you learn that were misrepresentations of
Yeah.
people like you?
Well, everything is misrepresented. So it's like, AARPs, their big message is like, be scared, be very scared. Like only we can solve your problems. Like, really? I don't think so. Like, what we found is people like, I mean, we're only talking about like kind of our gang, which is not everybody. And I think that's really super important to understand. And it's something that the companies and the brands they get so wrong. This idea that, the numbers people in these businesses, they just like, oh, we're going to target 50 to 55s, or, oh no, it's 53 to 63. Like, that's totally meaningless. It's just, there's so many other factors in there. And the people that we talk to that are in our gang, they don't feel scared. They feel scared now, but about other crazy stuff. But then they didn't. Like, they felt really self-empowered. They felt in control of their destiny. They felt at the peak of their powers. They were looking at, thinking about life 2.0. Like, if you're a woman and you're 50, and you have, some education, you have really good health, you're going to live another 50 years.
Mhm.
Like, that's extraordinary. So that's never happened before. And that causes, like, if you think you're going to live a long time, you're going to actually behave in a way to cause that to happen. And you're going to, that completely changes how you evaluate your future. And so we found that really interesting. I think that one of the most, and these weren't terribly surprising, they're kind of obvious things. The thing that was like really interesting is like, women are killing it. The men are just like, men don't listen to your podcast, so I can say this.
Totally.
They're just like a disastrous special needs group. It needs like an immediate intervention. Like, gentlemen, like, you're a mess. Like, get off of the sofa. So, and I say this, I mean, I have reason, I know this, and people, even like women, don't believe me about this because, the history of sexism and discrimination. But I can tell you, we publish gender neutral. 60% of our audience is women. That's what Google tells me. And on our social channels, it's upwards of 90%. But it's not just us. It's like, if the women are starting the organizations, they're leading the movements, they're the early adopters of products, they're the ones that are running companies, the women are just killing it. And, I ask a lot of smart, when I started seeing this, I was like, what's up with this? And I would ask a lot of smart people about this, like, why is this? And there's a whole like kind of range of theories on this. But I think it was really Gloria Feldman, who ran Planned Parenthood for a number of years. I asked her this, and she said, well, maybe it's as simple as, because the men step back, the women step forward. And that seems like the easiest explanation.
Well, gosh, wow. I've got so many questions for you based on all that. It was great. First of all, like, when you say, so let's start from the end.
Sure.
When the men step back, the women step forward.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit more about what's happening there.
Well, we have to think about a couple of things here. So, why are the men stepping back? I think that's it's hard to take an entire gender and generalize, but I would say that men are sort of programmed to excel at this, like achieve at these higher and higher levels. And then they reach a point where that's not possible. Okay, you're not achieving any higher. So then there's this sort of slide down. It's like, okay, well, that was nice. Now I can, like, I don't know, take up golf or something. And they just sort of slide back. I think there's probably some hormonal issues there. I think there's probably some work burnout stuff there. That's on their side. And then the women on the other side of that coin, several of them, have said, like, this is my time. It's like game on. Like, if you have a woman she's in her mid 50s, she's had a professional career, and she's, had 2, 3, 4 kids, and she's managed all that, and now the kids are gone. it's like, whoa, look at what I can do now. So there's some of that. I think there's also some hormonal stuff there that I don't really understand, but that seems to be the case. And it's to the point where I asked my friend Klaus, who runs the esteemable Copenhagen Institute for the Future. I love saying that.
That's great.
And I said, Klaus, what's up with this, man? Like, you tell me. And Klaus, being a futurist, said, well, and he rattled off a whole bunch of statistics about women's education and college participation and professional and all that stuff. And he said, listen, this is what's going to happen. In the future, we're going to have a board meeting. And in the board meeting, the board is going to say, we need some diversity in here. We got to get a man on the board. So that's
awesome.
That's where we're going.
Yeah. Well, your point around women are killing it in their 50s.
Yeah.
So, the fastest growing of female entrepreneurs are 50 plus.
Yeah.
And I think it's, to your point, a couple things. Like, it is the freedom. I think it's also the confidence. Like, can you talk a little bit about confidence growth as you even age, whether you're male or female, but there's something there.
There is, but it requires a couple of things. So it requires the ability to self-reflect. And in order to be in a position to self-reflect, you have to sort of be in a stable enough place that can happen. So not everybody can do that because of their circumstances. And I want to, just be clear about that there's a lot of people who in their 40s, 50s, 60s are having a really, really difficult time, and self-reflection is way down on the agenda from what am I eating today? But for the other people, what we find is that, again, I'm going to generalize here, but like in your 40s, let's go back. So say you're in your like teens and 20s. So what happens is your life is all about your parents. It's in alignment with or opposition to. It's sort of binary or some combination of that. And then you get on a career track and it's like, go, 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 go. Head down, don't look to the sides. You got a mortgage, you got some kids, whatever. I'm stressed, I gotta go. There's that. But then, sometime in the 40s, late 40s, people sort of get this sense of, there's an Elizabeth Bishop poem where she talks about a mountain in the dark. Like there's something out there, but you don't really know what it is. And then maybe, you get into your 50s and it becomes a little clearer. And sometime in there, you're able to self-reflect and in a non-reactive way. And you're able to look back and say, sort of independent of your parents or your boss or any of that stuff, you can say, oh, this works for me. This doesn't work for me. These people work for me. These people don't work for me. How can I improve we can align this or not. You sort of have a choice. And I think that so that's a lot of self-knowledge, that you have a pretty good sense of what you're good at, what you can do. And I think coupled on top of that, there's this, as somebody else once told me, like, what are they really going to do to you? So like, if I completely flub it on your amazing podcast today, how bad is it going to be?
Yeah. I think the realization of quote unquote failure at whatever level it's at just becomes more, I don't know, you become more comfortable with it. And so then you don't see it as such a threat.
Well, yeah, I think that I'm friends with Leslie Blodgett, and she has this great book titled Pretty Good Advice. I just love that to begin with. And she talks there about how she gave up the idea of regret. There's no more, she doesn't use regret anymore. She has mistakes, and you make a mistake. And the difference is, a mistake is something that you do and you learn from, and a regret is something that's sort of tied into your shame and stuff. So things more become, mistakes, and it's okay, to learn new, like I just tell you, like for myself, like this is going to be a bit of a rabbit hole. Warning.
Let's go there.
Just disclaimer, rabbit hole coming. So I had a a long time ago, I had this mental health professional tell me, and I was not under the care of this mental health professional. It was like a social setting. And although my wife would say I should be, but so
we'll have her on the next podcast.
Well, she can tell you all the like crazy. Yeah. So this woman was telling me, she says, all humans carry with them about 3 core self-delusions. And because they're self-delusions, you can't see them, right? They're self-delusions. And we defend them like just really with a lot of energy, right? And so for me, my delusion at the time was that my best and highest use as a human being was as a photographer. Now, I was a good photographer, and I did okay. I was never going to be Avedon, but I was, I did all right. But I thought that was all I could do. And when I started AGEIST, I'd never written. I didn't know. I'd never spoken in front of people. I didn't know what a Google Doc was. I'd never seen PowerPoint. It's just like I was handicapped. And I had to learn all this stuff, which was embarrassing and difficult, but I learned it. And the delusion there was that I couldn't learn it or that I wouldn't be good at it. And it turns out I'm actually much relatively better at this thing I do now than I was as a photographer. Like there were other people who were, better. They were just better photographers than I was. They were better at what they did. But there's nobody in the world that's better at this thing that I do now, which was really interesting. So now that I'm deep in the rabbit hole, I don't even remember what your question was.
No. I think that but it's on this notion of self-reflection, and that
yes, exactly.
When you arrive at that point
Right.
to be able to do that,
right?
And I think age gives you a little bit more permission, or it's like a privilege of age or time on this earth, isn't it? Don't you think?
It goes both ways. It cuts both ways. So on the one hand, age tells you you should be able to do something and not make a fool of yourself, because people look to you for guidance. And so there's the option of taking yourself very seriously and saying, oh, well, I'm, Big Bob, and I know how to do things that Big Bob does, and don't tell me, or whatever. And so that leads to a sense of sort of closing down and incuriosity. And it's based on fear, because you don't want to make a mistake, because you don't want to look, you don't want to like feel ashamed, right? And if you're going to learn something new, you're going to fail. That's just the way it is. Like, it's okay though, but you that's how you learn. The other side of that is more openness, which says that, yeah, so what if I fail? Whatever. I'm going to look like, I mean, really, Jill, like probably 30% of what I do every day, I suck at, but I'm getting better at it, and I have people around that tell me like how to do it, and I improve. That's the other way to go, but it can go either way. And I think with the guys, a lot of their problem is I just invented this character, Big Bob.
I like Big Bob. I think we're going to call this podcast Big Bob.
No, don't go there.
Just the episode. Just kidding. I'm kidding.
So Big Bob is entirely fossilized. He's not going anywhere. And he's probably a jerk, because people will say like, hey, you should check this new app out. And Bob's going to be like, oh, well, back in my day, we didn't have apps, or some, the rap, right? Mm-hmm. Or you say, oh, that looks really cool. I have no idea how to do this. Would you mind taking a few minutes and like walk me through how this happens? And I don't get it. Could you show me again? I still don't get it. One more time, please.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, well, then, then you're good. Those are the people in our gang.
Yeah. I love that. And I think your point earlier, not everyone's in a place of self-reflection or
Right.
capable of going there.
Right.
And sometimes even if I think about the women that we work with at Gennev, they're on this journey. They're like in the valley, before they're about to arrive there.
Sure.
What do you with the people or your gang or the people that you research, or even your community, because you've got an incredible community with AGEIST, do you see people and how they come through that transition? And what's the behavior right before you get to that point of being able to have that self-reflection?
It sucks. It's like totally sucks. And it's confusing. It's a struggle. you're kind of, I mean, for myself, I thought, I felt like like a Roomba, you know, those like vacuums where you're just like bumping into stuff all the time. You just like, if I keep bumping into stuff, some door will open. And it's kind of like that. Like it's difficult because realizing you're carrying with you these self-delusions, and the delusions come in two flavors, basically. There's the rare delusion that says you think you're really good at something you're not. And we have some political leadership that feels that way.
Yeah, I agree.
But most of us, it's the other way. It's self-limiting, right? It says, you cannot do this. You should not do this. Do not even investigate this. Take this off the menu immediately. So you have this stuff out there, and then you have all this life experience, and now you're in a place, whatever your age is. My guess is, when you were 10 years old, did you not imagine that people that age would look like you or act like you? So you don't really have role models, right? There are people out there. That's what we do at AGEIST. We show role models, but you still sort of have baked in this idea that I don't have the capacity to learn. I don't have the capacity to change. All this stuff is sort of this racket in the background. You put all that together, it's a mess. And it takes, for some people, it's obvious. And for other people, the best thing to do is talk to other people, because they are not going to be suffering your self-delusions.
Yeah, because they've come through that, or they can recognize it, but they've come through it. Yeah,
they're not you. They're looking at you from the outside, and they can say to you, like my wife did for a couple of decades, David, you're really good at telling stories. And I was like, no, I can't do that. That's all I do now, is tell stories. So I think the other thing that I really caution people about is this idea of passion. I am very anti-passion.
Tell me about that.
I know, it's radical. I'm really in favor of purpose. So passion is inward looking, purpose is outward looking. And passion is also like super volatile, and it's like, how do I feel today? I feel passionate about whatever. In my experience, that can get you in a whole lot of confusion. If you look at it the other way, though, and you say, how can I be most helpful to other people? And do that, and just get passionate about that, bingo, home run. But there's so many people that are like, if you think about it, so say you have a successful business, and you become passionate about something, rather yoga or skiing, whatever, and you decide, this business thing's kind of a drag. I'm going to stop that. I'm going to become a yoga instructor, or I'm going to become a ski instructor. Hello, food stamps. Like, that's not a really good play. It might be better to say to yourself, I could really help. I could be very helpful with this skill set I have to these other people over here. I bet they could really use me. I can make a difference here. Let's go do that, and become passionate about that. There's like a Japanese Venn diagram that talks about, it's called Ikigai, which is not, as my friend Chip Connolly says, icky guy, but Ikigai.
It's an important distinction. Yeah.
It's not a creep in the supermarket. It's something else.
Yeah.
And it's this idea of the intersection of what you like what jazzes you up, what you're good at, and what your usefulness is to other people. And when you hit that button, you never leave. That's like your lifetime purpose, and you're good.
What I really like about that is it also takes the pressure off you. Like, it feels, you always think about, like, we're always taught to, well, what are you going to do next? Well, what are you going to be next? What are you going to be? And we have to have a thing. And that's what, and so many people are like, well, I don't know. I don't have a 5-year plan or whatever.
Right.
And what I love about that is kind of like, well, what am I good at? Or what do I like to do? And just,
not only what are you good at, how can you help other people? That's the key component here. So that inward looking, that sort of navel gazing, that like, there's just like a lot of sort of self-help programs out there that are like, discover your passion. Well, then what? Like, and how hard is that? And how does that change from hour to hour, from day to day? And like, and it's about you, but it's not about you.
Yeah.
You gotta stop that. It's about everybody else. And like, just like, if you flip that switch and it's like, when I was younger, I learned a party trick, and I'm very socially awkward at parties, or I used to be. So I would just go in and I couldn't speak. I wouldn't know how to do anything, and I would just feel horrible, and I would just, kind of have this like self-esteem holocaust over in the corner, like, oh, I'm a bad person. Oh, nobody likes me. But then I learned the solution, which was stop that and start being useful. So I go in, and this works great with my family too. It's like, I go in and it's like, what can I do right now? Do you need your kitchen cleaned? Great, I'm in. You want me to like take the garbage out? Done. What else? And now I'm not thinking about me, I'm thinking about them. And I feel like all that all just like vaporizes, right? Because I'm not like staring at my navel and thinking about like whatever.
Well, it's like you have a role in that moment, like a job, and you're needed. We all want to be needed.
You're needed. Exactly.
Yeah.
You want to be needed, right? You want to wake up in the morning and say, I got to go do this thing because these people are counting on me.
Yeah.
I'm going to help their lives today. That purpose becomes the passion. Versus it's really hard, at least for me. I mean, maybe the people out there that can do that, but it doesn't work for me.
Well, and I'm going to throw kind of not a wrench in this thinking, but I'm going to throw something back at you. So women typically are like needed by their kids and by their partners and by their elder parents. And they're just like, oh, I don't want to serve anybody else. I just, and so kind of, but it's not serving, it's serving those right tight within their circle.
Right.
Versus looking beyond that. What's your advice, or what are your thoughts on that, and freeing yourself, I think, from obligations to going to where you're needed in a fulfilling sort of way that gives back?
I'm not a woman.
That's a tough one, but that I know.
It's really hard.
Yeah, I know.
The conflict between the maternal impulse and doing this, I think is be the person your kids want you to be. Be the role model for your kids. So be the role model for your husband. Be the role model for the people around you, and model that behavior. And if that means getting a job and doing, like, having a really important part of a company, being part of a team and feeling really great about that, or if that means helping people in some other way or contributing in some way, and you can show them that you feel really great about what you're doing, that's a way of taking care of them too.
I love that, because that's achievable, and that's
I think especially with people who are a little older, who for somebody like my mom is 90, like, my mom's not going to be getting another job, but like, this would be really difficult for her to understand what I'm saying. Different generation, but that's, I mean, those aren't my people. That's
yeah. It's part of the group that we're in now. Switching, I guess, taking this lens and putting it on 2020. What a crazy year. We're all in. It's created a lot of change. In terms of, the 50 plus kind of crowd that you primarily focus on.
Yeah.
Have you seen the pandemic and the political landscape and the Black Lives Matter, so much this year, change the mental health, the emotional health, the outlook of this community? Any insights on that you've seen in your work?
Oh my God. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. if you're a human being on the planet right now and you're not feeling stressed, you need to see a mental health professional. Like there's something wrong with you. COVID has opened up a window. It's a catalyst for like all these, we are surrounded by existential crises in a way that never really were in the past. And a lot of them were there. Racial inequality was there. Climate disaster was there. The crazy orange man was there. But what happened with COVID is it just went into hyperdrive. And COVID has opened a window for a reevaluation of all manner of things on a personal level, like what am I doing? Who am I with? That sort of thing. Like I sold my place in Los Angeles and I moved to Park City, Utah. And that's not rare. Like a lot of people done stuff like that. But then there's also this awareness of what's going on around us in a bigger way. And as humans, we can only handle so many life-threatening existential crises at a time before we just have to hit the shutdown button. Like it's just too much. So what we found is with people our age, and we've done a bunch of research on this, and like so quant research, what that means is like we give you a set of essentially multiple choice questions and you try and answer them truthfully. And the quant stuff was showing like a 10-point shift on the way people felt about the future. And I thought, that's interesting, but they're lying. Like I've never done a survey where people lied, or I told the survey people they're lying, but they were, because, so then we went back and then we did actual interviews with people. And, some people you'd say like, how you doing? And right away, like the floodgates open. They're like, oh my God, my job, the this, the that, the orange man, the like, but most people, the answer would be, I'm fine. Everything's good. I got my job. And then at the 2-minute mark, they would start telling me about the homeless in the park, or the race riot that happened down the street, or, climate fires in California. And I'm saying, okay. And then I would say, so how's your day? Like, what do you tell me about your day? And they would describe in detail their day. And there'd be like an hour or 2 hours of their day dedicated to stress management. Like, and they would, there's like, well, I got to do this and I got to do this and all this stuff. And I said, well, why are you doing that? And then it comes out, oh my God, I'm just unbelievable. You can't believe it. It's just, I can't stand it. I can't watch the TV. Blah, blah, blah. And I think with people like us at our age, it's one of the handicaps of age is that people look to us for guidance and wisdom, which I think is really misplaced, but they do. And so if you're in a position of leadership and somebody asks you how you're doing, you don't say, I'm freaking out. Right. You say, I'm fine. How are you? And so, but they're not fine at all. No one's fine. And what's so interesting is in this a lot of this work we did, we thought like COVID itself, the health threat, because, allegedly if you're over 60, you're in like a high risk group, would be the big thing. But like now people just adopt. They understand social distancing, they wear masks, they know how COVID is transmitted. COVID is more survivable. It's still not something you want to get. It's really, really bad. So that's like worry number 6 or 7 on the list. There's all this other stuff that's on top. And most of that stuff has to do with things that are outside of people's control in a really huge, unmanageable way that is just right in front of them, and they don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
I think on your notion of I'm fine.
Yeah.
There's also like, I know I personally, I'm always like, I want to be a glasses half full kind of person. I don't want to be like, I don't want to be an Eeyore and just drag the others, down. So I think there's part of that mentality in people's response. I know specifically with a lot of women, either they haven't gotten to that point of self-reflection and can't just, and aren't thinking that deeply about how they are or how they're feeling. But they also don't want to be perceived as like just down in the dumps, because, there's just this notion of, oh, that's no fun to be around. And yet we're all surrounded by it. So it's a little bit the elephant in the room.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also walking and chewing gum. Like you can recognize there's some really big things that need a massive reset. Like you can, and you can realize, you can say, okay, this is our moment. Let's hit the reset button on all this stuff that is very much not working. And you can be hopeful about that. You can also be less hopeful, but still be helpful. And I always, my cure for all mental health problems and stress is just go be helpful. Just go help somebody. You're going to feel better. And then we can talk about your stress later. Like, go help the woman across the street take her trash out, and then come back in and we're going to talk again.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, that exact question, like the people who are coping, or at least getting real with how they're feeling, is the first thing. And then what's the next thing, like to just like coping or dealing with it or feeling a little bit better? You're saying get out and surf or get out and help, or.
Well, yeah. So I think there's
hearing.
Yeah, I think that's right. I sound like sort of a bit hard ass about that, but I think now we need to focus more on self-care. It's like they tell you in the airplane, you got to put the oxygen mask on, take care of yourself before you put it on somebody else. And I think, I've seen people's meditation regimes really cranked up. People are in better shape, like locked in the house. They're in better shape now than they ever have been in their lives. And they're paying attention to things like wellness is like, right. If I tell my clients, like, if you're not in the wellness business, you're not in business. That's the only business there is. I think that there's more emphasis. We have to do more of that. Last week on Super Age, we had Carrie Otis on, and she was talking about, somebody who came from a really like cover the New York Post level of unmanageability and heroin addiction and gunshots and Mickey Rourke and like, whoa. And, she has a very serious meditation practice. She's 52 now. She's got a couple of great kids. She lives in Colorado. She's awesome. A lot of self-care there. And I think I think it's focusing on how we can be helpful as a community. But to be a helpful member of that community, we have to be functioning. So we got to do this other stuff too, to take care of ourselves. I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm. And do you see typically what's driving people to that point? It can be naturally to just, you want to feel better, take care of yourself first. But so often I think people have to come into that on their own. They can hear it from you, but they have to come to it as well on their own. And that involves challenge and,
well, it's
hardship.
It's Carrie told me, she says, you got to make the decision to get on the cushion. I'm not going to make that for you. You got to do that. So it's an action. It's not, I'm going to, just do like, somehow I'm going to be magically, this is going to happen to me. No, like if you want to feel less stress, watch less news. Like you got to take that action, like stay away from social media, like go out and, run a couple miles or whatever. Like, but you got to do that. Like you have to make the decision to do that. And so there's a certain level of willingness that one has to come to do that. And it's, I think that it's a funny thing with this sort of stuff, Jill. It's like you can open a door for somebody, but it doesn't mean they're going to walk through it. You just let them know. And that's what I tell people all the time about AGEIST. It's like, here, like, we're just presenting options. Like, you don't have to take them. You can do whatever you want to do. I'm not going to tell you what to do. But if you want this, these are the actions you need to take that I cannot take for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You know, I love that, because I think that also makes people feel empowered.
Yeah.
No one, people kind of want to be told what to do, but they don't. And so I like that you're just like almost doing the opposite of like, these are options. We're not going to tell you what to do. And it almost makes them more intrigued about listening, engaging all the
Yeah.
more.
I'm that whole like, I mean, you think about Jill, you remember the war on drugs? Like, how well did that go? Your brain on drugs, or Nancy Reagan. Like, let's get a refrigerator.
The egg in the frying pan.
Right. Or
yeah.
like the refrigerator magnet, drugs are bad. Right. Like,
Yeah.
that doesn't work so well. No.
Yeah. Especially with opioid use at an all-time high.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awful.
Well, on to more positive topics then.
Sure.
As you think about, the work you're doing, Super Age is your podcast, AGEIST is the magazine. I know I've joined a number of your and Chip's happy hours, which I would just advise anyone. They're entertaining. It's like you get an inside, peek into like two friends' conversation. It's just what's next for your work in, I think in many ways, inspiring this 50 plus audience, but also, doubly working with your clients, AKA brands, media, you name it, to like see this audience in a different way?
Well, more, essentially. It's just like more of the same. What we do is we show like how people are living, and we try and decode best practices, and we show people what we think are attainable and aspirational role models for what this is about. And we do that now with Super Age podcast is like super fun for me, because you just get to like now we're at the scale, right? And we have this cred. So, I can just like call like whoever up, and it's like, hey, you're interesting. I want you to come on. We're going to talk. And they're all like, yeah, fun. Let's do that. So there'll be more of that. We're growing the team. Happy hour we do with Chip every other Thursday, and from now through the end of the year we have some fairly high profile people. We got Danny Meyer coming up. You know Danny Meyer?
Oh yeah. Shake Shack.
Yeah. In the books.
I know there's way more than Shake Shack, but
So Shake Shack was an accident. He didn't intend.
Really?
Yeah, it was an accident. It was a pop-up that he put into Madison Square Park, which was like around the corner from Gramercy Tavern, one of his restaurants. It was kind of a rundown park, and they wanted to raise some money. So he took over one of the kiosks and started selling hamburgers. And that turned into like 150 Shake Shacks like around the country. And he wrote the book, Setting the Table, which anybody who works at AGEIST, you have to read that book. Like it's a job requirement, because it's all about hospitality. It's making people, how do you make people feel welcome? So we got him, and we got some other people coming up, and that's the happy hour is really fun. And it's just, we're now, we're raising a bunch of money. So there's things that we'll get, especially the Super Age side of things, is going to get a lot bigger.
Awesome. That's
more
fantastic.
Fun. Yeah.
Well, what I like at the heart of what you do is like you're creating role models. And I know as a woman, like women on boards, women in corporate world, like we've always wanted role models, or we've always thought if you establish people who look like you, or, even in healthcare, women of color, they want to work with healthcare providers that look like them or that get them.
Sure.
And I think that notion of a role model or someone who gets me or I can identify with, it's just so important in, I don't know, belonging. And
if you think of this racially, right? So if you had, there were no African Americans in any sort of aspirational capacity on television until like when? Like the 80s? And
the Jeffersons were the first.
The Jeffersons, right?
One of the first, I think.
and it's just, we, even though we have this name ageist, we don't really fight ageism. People want us to fight ageism. We don't. We refuse, because I feel like if you fight something, you strengthen it. So we don't do that. In my feeling is, if you want to move the culture isn't moved by regulation. Culture isn't moved by laws or any of this stuff. That all comes later. That stuff follows culture. What moves culture is story. And the big part of story are the visuals. So that's how you do it. So that's what we do, is we say, well, yeah, there's this whole narrative that's going on out there that says that we're supposed to live in a certain way and we're supposed to do these other things, and we really don't have any capacity to do anything else. And we say, that's BS. No, like, here, if you want to do this, this is available. This is on the menu now. And I think it's the same. It's very similar to, if we look at, with women. So, when Marlo Thomas did That Girl in, what was it, like 1968, that changed the culture. Like that, I mean, it sounds really silly now, but that was like epic. That was a big deal. Here's a woman on her own, doing her own thing in New York City, unheard of. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're doing now. And I think if you look at, the Black Lives Matter movement, that's a lot of what they're saying. It's like, tell our story in a different way, show us in another way. And people, that's what moves the culture. I sound very strident about
no,
that.
I love, if I were to take away one thing from our conversation, and there's been many things, but it's like, if you fight it, you strengthen it.
Yeah, don't do that.
And I think that is such a parallel, even in, as we think about women's wellness and health and menopause, like, we're all fighting it. We're all fighting its stigma. We're fighting the age associated with it. Like, I think that's just really powerful.
I mean, you see how well that worked for the women's movement in the 60s and 70s. It didn't work so well. So I think that's, that, although I love the Public Enemy song, Fight the Power. It's one of my favorite.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I know, I love it. But the way you fight the power is you don't fight the power. You just show an alternative and you let people make the choice. Like, you just say, you can join us, you can join the other guys, whatever you want to do, what feels good for you. Yeah.
What fuels you? Like, you're an interesting person, David. And, yeah, what do you use to energize you, to fuel you? What do you do?
Well, I'm really curious about things. And I feel very inadequate. So I have this sort of, this complex that I'm not smart enough, and I don't know enough things, and I can't do enough stuff. Now, I'm 61 years old, and I've been carrying this around for a very long time, but it's an awesome motivator. So
I think you and 80% of the population probably.
Well, it's like, it's like, oh, I got to read that thing. I got to know this thing. I got to talk to this person. They're so interesting. What can we learn from them? What can I take from them and, show to my audience? Because I think this is so curious. We're doing, here, it's not video, but so here, there's this like great book. You got to get this book. It's called I Am Beauty.
Oh, nice.
And so I got this, somebody sent this to me, and I called up the guy who did it, Rico Campo. And I was like, wow, you're showing women in a way like I've never seen them shown. Like, I'm a photographer, so I see like, wow, this is really great. Why don't more people do this like this? And so I called Rico up. I said, hey, you're awesome. I want you on my podcast, and I don't know anything about makeup or skincare, but educate me, tell me, and we'll bring everybody else along, and you can tell me like what's your visual viewpoint on women that are, he's like 40s to 80s, and but it's just like how fun is that? Who would not want to, Why not?
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful, it's also like, it's a very infectious, that draws people to you. Like, people inherently are all curious, and we don't all have the courage to show it, I think. To go out
What
and
are they
say,
going to do to you?
exactly.
They're just going to say no, whatever. How much did that hurt? Not so
it
much.
all circles back. No, that's great. Well, I think that, first of all, I think I said this to you earlier, David. You're like the first guy that we've had on the Gennev podcast. So besides a doctor, I should say, a physician. But you're like the first, and what a first you have been. So thank you for joining us today.
Standing up for my gender today.
Yeah, no, it's great because, at the end of the day, women need men, and and men need women as we transition through things in life. And we focus on the transition of menopause in our business, and it's a big transition, but I think just hearing how you think, and even just sharing some of the observations that you've gathered in your work, has just been really motivating. I know, I love it. I'm just a huge fan of your work and what you do. And so thank you for bringing some of it to us today.
Well, thank you. I mean, in spite of your nice comments, I find at 61, I grew up with a single mom, and I still find women to be an utter mystery. They constantly do things that surprise me. Like, why are you doing that? So I don't know how. I do my best.
We're mysteries to ourselves oftentimes.
Okay. Well, that's fair then.
There you go. You would be both. Well, thank you again, David.
Thanks so much, Jill. Great to be here.
I want to thank my guest, David Stewart, for joining us today. I encourage you to check out David's online magazine and community, AGEIST, by going to weareageist.com. For an even more intimate experience, subscribe to his podcast, Super Age, where he profiles inspiring people reinventing their careers, where they live, even their education after 50. And until next time, have a great week, and we'll see you soon.